Hi, welcome to the Voice-Over PowerPoint regarding violence and abuse. Let's start this off with a little quiz. America, as a culture, is violent. True or false? Well, I imagine everybody kind of got that. Okay, if you think about it, we started with the American Revolution, we had the Civil War, then we had the Wild Wild West. Most of our history is built around violence. Are we much different than the rest of the world? What are most cultures famous for? What's recorded in history? That's right, wars, violence. So look around that. Can you think of a culture that isn't noted for violence? So we started with the American Revolution. When I was growing up, every kid had a pair of 6 guns, or at least one, and we played war and everything. That kids today aren't doing that. They don't use as many guns and stuff, toy guns, as they used to. For one reason, they look too real, and I don't know that it's cut down on the violence. Our cartoons are, they used to say our cartoons were too violent, and it may have been. I watched a lot of Roadrunner cartoons and Bugs Bunny and Elmer Fudd, and somebody was always getting shot or killed or something, but somehow you just kind of knew it was a cartoon. It didn't really translate into real life.
So the question always comes up, is violence on TV and violent video games cause violence in people? And I fall into the camp that says violent video games and violent TV don't really cause real world violence. Granted, some games are tasteless and some TV shows and movies are gratuitous in their violence, and that goes too far in my opinion, but I think it doesn't create the violent behavior. On the other hand, violent people or disturbed young people with violent inclinations usually gravitate toward violent video games and other violent medias. So it's no surprise when a school shooter also played violent video games. Although it's also no surprise that millions of other young people play those same games without ever shooting a gun in real life. My biggest concern with the violence on the video games and on TV is that it develops a desensitization, especially the video games that are so realistic. The avatars and the people in them are so realistic, they appear real. And so you get young children, 6, 7, 8 years old, that find a gun and shoot somebody, and they don't realize that they can't hit the reset button, and that person's going to come back to life. Now, I'm not going to get into the gun debate in this. So we're just talking about violence. So job stress can lead to family stress. Family stress can lead to job stress. When you have to take care, especially of a baby, a child, you have to be there for them. They don't necessarily listen to you all the time. And the more upset you get with a child, the more upset that they seem to get. And so you can get into just an ongoing cycle of stress that you take to work, and And then depending on the work you do and the work environment you do, there could be violence in the workplace also. Back in the early 2000s, there was a term referred to as going postal. There seemed to be a series of incidents where postal workers were coming into the workplace and shooting people. And psychologists and everybody in the aftermath of all of these shootings, there were multiple shootings to where it became a term. You're going postal, and what they determined was that the work environment was mind-numbing, just sorting the mail, and that most of the time the managerial positions, as people moved up, they managed by yelling at people because nobody really gave them managerial training. And so after a while, people just kind of lost it and came back violently. And all of these things add toward violence. The more stressed out you are, the less control you have over your environment, the more stressed you become, the more angry you become, the more likely it is you commit violence. And we don't know yet. You guys are coming back this semester in 2020 with the coronavirus. We don't know yet how that is going to stress everybody out because life has to change, whether it's for weeks, months, perhaps even years. The concept of social distancing and actually working from home or working teleworking, whatever you want to call it, is going to be the same way you're taking an online course. Everybody's going to be doing this for a while. We don't know what kind of stress that's going to add. I think of the faculty at the college that have never taught online before. I've been doing this for 16 years. And all of a sudden, in the middle of the semester, they have to start teaching online. And it's going to be stressful. All of these things add to stress.
Now, what role do drugs and alcohol play? A big one, as you might imagine. While we haven't gone over the alcohol and addiction voiceover, now the first thing alcohol numbs or attacks are the judgment centers of the brain. Okay, so you do stupid things after you've had too much to drink. And there's a tendency for people to get fearless, stupid fearless. And some people just get aggressive as soon as they start drinking. All the other drugs, especially the uppers, lead to this. Possibly the only drug not linked with individual violence is marijuana. It's linked with violence all around it as it's sold and distributed and everything else, but that's not from the drug itself. So part again of our culture has been movies and how people were depicted. If you've got a few minutes, click on both of these YouTube sites and check out the video. So the first one is of James Cagney. And now this movie, he was a gangster, public enemy number one, and he squishes a grapefruit in his girlfriend's face. This was, acceptable. The second one, Cary Grant, is more. It's a comedy. It's the Philadelphia Story, and it's meant to be funny. But if you think about it for more than a second or two, you realize it's not funny when he shoves Katharine Hepburn down. So domestic violence is pervasive. Up to 25% of homes in America experience domestic violence, either spousal abuse, child abuse, elder abuse. The statistic is frightening. And you have to remember, verbal abuse is emotional abuse. Remember what you've learned about self-images and self-esteem. Verbal abuse keeps attacking someone's self-esteem, and it becomes insidious till after a while the person, as a young adult or an adult, has no self-esteem, and they are perfect victims for continued abuse. Now, the cycle of violence is extremely predictable, and it's the same for all the different types of abuse, whether it's mental, emotional, sexual, or physical. It starts off with the incident. Something happens, someone gets hit, let's say, then there's a making up period. Okay, the perpetrator is sorry, and they want to make up, and they can be very serious about it. They most of the time are genuinely sorry that they did it. So for a period of time, there's some calm. Now that could go for days, it could go for weeks, it could go for months, and sometimes it can go for years. But eventually, tension starts building again, and then there's another incident. And what we know is that every time this goes around, it gets worse. So each time it makes it around, the incidents get more and more physical, more and more abusive. Each time it gets worse. And an incident is any type of abuse. So kids yelling at parents or parents yelling at kids is abusive. There's got to be a better way. If you find yourself screaming at your kid, you need to stop and ask what's going on. If your kid is screaming at you, you need to stop and ask what's going on. It's not good communication, and it becomes abusive. So let's look at the cycle. After the incident, there's the making up. The abusers may apologize. They'll promise that it won't happen again. One of the great tricks is they blame, I wouldn't have hit you, honey, if you hadn't gone out and bought that new pair of shoes. I wouldn't have hit you if you hadn't provoked me. You knew I was in a bad mood. So somehow they turn it on you. Now, the psychology behind the victim is that they want the relationship to work. So they look at themselves and they say, well, maybe it was my fault. Maybe I did push him too far. Okay? And what also happens quite often is that after a while, if the victim brings it up, the accuser says, you're making that up. That never happened. I never hit you. So then there becomes this big elephant in the middle of the room that everybody kind of tiptoes around and doesn't want to talk about. The calm. The abuser acts like whatever it was didn't happen, and so abuse may not be taking place. Promises may be made. They may be buying you gifts, and the victim is ever hopeful. Okay, it won't happen again. He really means it. Especially if you get some nice gifts. And so this leads the person, the victim, into a false sense of security. But then tension once again starts building. Whatever upsets the abuser happens again. Could be stress from work, could be any number of things, could be alcohol and drugs. Then communication begins to break down, and the victim is doing everything they can to keep the abuser calm. They feel like they're walking on eggshells. I don't know if you've ever been in that position, but it's not a pleasant position. You know that somewhere along the line you're going to do something that they can interpret so that they can go off. Now, all of this tension in the home, even if there's not actual physical abuse, when the parents are at each other, the child's world begins to shake. We talked a little bit about this in divorce. You know, if you're yelling and screaming at each other all the time, what is that doing to the kids? Maybe divorce would be better. At least it would give the child, while it's unpleasant in the beginning, something steady to stay on. Now, when we look at the incident, sometimes the victims will actually provoke an incident, but they get to the point where they have to, get rid of the tension. So that they're not walking on eggshells the whole time. So they may burn the food. They may spill something on purpose just to set the guy off, so that they get it over with.
If you're in a healthy relationship and you don't know anyone who's been in an abusive relationship, it's very easy to think, well, it's got to be the person's fault. They're stupid. They don't leave. Why won't the abused person leave? And in most of these instances, we're talking about women, but it can be a man, okay? But it comes out to be the same thing. It starts with this hope or living in denial that it's going to change. It's going to get better. If I just work harder, it'll get better. If I'm nice to him, if I don't upset him, it'll get better. Oh, he said he's going to quit drinking, and I'm sure he will. The other reason is fear. Another reason, the fear is real. Quite often, you feel for their physical being, maybe even their life. They've been told if they leave, the guy will track them down and kill them or beat their kids. So there can be a real fear to all of this. And then there's humiliation. They are so ashamed, and embarrassed that they've let this happen to them. Okay, and it's a real problem, and they don't want to tell people. Now, if you're in one of these relationships, you're also being, usually, you're being isolated. They're making you, they're gaslighting you. I'll talk about that in a moment. And they're keeping you away from family and friends. You think you are all alone, and so the situation becomes like the old saying, the devil you know is better than the devil that you don't know, because you don't know what's outside the door. You don't know where you're going to go. You don't know how you're going to make ends meet, how you're going to feed your kid, and so forth. So you convince yourself that staying is better.
This is another model called the coiled spring model, and it comes out of India, where they have their own huge problem with spousal abuse. And as you can see, the spring gets tighter and tighter as it goes down. In India, it's pretty much accepted that men can hit women, and when it happens, then the woman goes back to their family of origin, and there's some relief. Then they go back, same thing, just like before. That gives the cycle starts again. Tension builds up. Uh, you know, they go back to their family, and but eventually the family says you can't come back here anymore, and or the person is totally subjugated. You do this enough times, you beat a dog enough times, and they're gonna obey you. Uh, and this is what happens when you are when you're abused. You become like an animal. There's a conditioning and a reflex, all that behavioral psychology that you learned about earlier. It works. You want to avoid the pain, so you do what the person has you do. So we normally think of the violence against women because the great majority of it is against women. It's men against women. But physical abuse does happen to men too. And men are really ashamed to admit it. So they will put up with it longer than the women will. Or they may retaliate, which could be worse. So do you think there's more of it, or it's just been underreported? Personally, I think it's always been going on, and it's probably being reported more. So, how are men often abused? Beyond the physical, how are men abused? I can tell you there's a lot of psychological abuse that women inflict upon men. And I'm not talking about just putting pressure on them to do something. I'm talking about real, concentrated abuse. Now, elders, another form of elders, and not all elder abuse occurs in retirement homes. Although there's a lot that goes on there. The picture on the right kind of tells the story. My father used to beat me, my husband used to beat me, now my son beats me. I guess I'm just used to it. So she's been in this scenario through 3 generations. The key to this is no more secrets. Okay, people don't. You have the same challenge in alcohol and drug abuse. People, as they say, don't want to air their dirty laundry. They don't want other people to think badly of them. Well, then you're going to keep getting more of the same if you don't let out the secrets. No more secrets. So here's a scenario for you. The first 3 years of marriage, they went to his family's home for the holidays. During the 4th year, she complained and said she wanted to go to her parents' home for change. He beat the crap out of her and said no. She never asked again. So, when did the abuse stop? A, after the initial abuse. B, the next holiday season when she didn't ask. Or C, it never stopped. Well, the correct answer is C. The threat of the abuse is abuse. It never really stopped. Does that make sense?
I mentioned gaslighting earlier. Abusers are often guilty of gaslighting. The term comes from an old 1944 movie called Gaslighting, back when they used to have gas lights out in the streets. And the story was about a guy driving his wife crazy. But gaslighting is a form of manipulation and abuse concentrated on making someone doubt reality. They do it by blatantly lying, constant cover-ups, deny conversations or events ever happened. They manipulate others to see you differently or the victim differently. Your self-esteem slowly erodes, and you begin to question what is real. You start to think that you're bad or that you're crazy. Actions contradict words. There are tons of broken promises, and you end up having to feel like you have to defend reality because you're constantly being told that you're making it up or the person never said that. And it is literally crazy making. And as I mentioned, narcissists do this very easily. It can be second nature to them. They don't have to work at it. I don't want to get political, but all you have to do is look at President Trump.
So there's a separate handout with the 3 different wheels that they've created. You'll see, if you go online, you'll see that there's all sorts of them. But most of them say about the same thing. And I like this one because it gives some examples around the side. Punching, kicking, grabbing, pushing, shoving, hitting, beating or throwing her down, twisting arms, tripping. These are all forms of abuse. If you look around, isolation. If you're getting cut off from your friends and family, that's abuse. And that's necessary so that some of this other stuff can go on. That's tied in quite often with economic abuse. If you're not allowed to work and he doles out the money to you and tells you what you can spend it on, that's economic abuse. The put-downs, making you feel like you're worthless. Could be sexual abuse involved, using the children to make people feel guilty. The threats, either and following through on the threats. Male privilege. That's that I'm the king of the castle stuff. I'm the big deal. I get to make the decisions. And then just the general intimidation. And I added the entitlement to this because what happens within an abusive relationship is that the abuser, after a point in time, if they didn't at the beginning, they will begin to feel that they are entitled to treat you like crap. They totally objectify you. Okay? You're not a human being, therefore you don't deserve respect. Therefore, you're dismissed. Any of your ideas, your complaints, your suggestions are just dismissed. You're not worthy of breathing the same air as them. And this can be in all sorts of different stages, but there is an entitlement that they can act this way, and you don't have any right to complain about it. In fact, you should be thankful that they care so much about you.
Another form of sexual abuse is sexual coercion. Now, this is brought about, it goes on constantly within the culture, within society. It's been brought to light in the past several years. Most of you are aware of the Me Too movement and how it's brought this to the forefront. But the cultural forces of men are that we're taught dominance, we're taught competition and aggression. Women are taught to be submissive. This is one of the challenges you see in our elections with a woman running for president. There's a double standard. There's an acceptance of violence by men, and the aggressive or violent pornography lends itself to these characteristics, and the people who commit these acts first believe in the traditional gender roles. Okay, the second one is they approve violence against women. They accept the rape myths that every woman really wants to have sex with you. And no does not mean no. That regardless, you really want it. They perceive inaccurately characteristics or behavior. So if a woman smiles at a guy, these people look at that and say, oh, she wants to have sex with me. And then they have probably their own history of abuse or promiscuity, and you add a little alcohol or drugs to the abuse, and there you got it. You've got the poster boys for this are Bill Cosby, who for years drugged women and raped them, and then Harvey Weinstein, who just recently was convicted, and he's going to get 20-something years, plus he's going on trial in California too. But this is all part of the Me Too movement. The women have finally stood up and said, no, I was abused, I was raped. There was sexual coercion. I could lose my job if I didn't have sex or perform a sex act. So this is all part of that. That is all still part of abuse.
So what are the consequences of rape and sexual abuse? First off, the trauma, physical, mental, emotional. There's immediate shock. There are long-term problems, depression, can be physical injury, can have a sexually transmitted disease. Generally, the stress and all of that will negatively impact your health, and then the person may begin to act out because they have self-esteem questions and problems. They may believe that they brought it on themselves. When you are a rape victim, you didn't do anything wrong, okay? And I wish we looked at rape differently in this country, but unfortunately we don't. There's questions about that in your threaded discussions, and we'll discuss it further there. So let's talk about teen. Since when we're in developmental psychology, most of us watching this are in developmental, but regardless, many of you are in your late teens in school here, and so this is fresh in everybody's mind. So is dating violence on the rise? True or false? Yes, it is. Males deliver abuse quite a bit. What about the females? Is that violence on the rise? Ooh, yeah. This little number down here has added to this, the cell phone. And it was bad enough just with the cell phone when they could track you anywhere, and now they have the GPS, so now they can keep up with where you are. They can track you, call you, what are you doing? Texting even added to this, so that now even when you couldn't talk on the phone, you can text. And this constant vigilance is often interpreted as they care about me, and that may be the way it starts. But if it starts becoming intrusive, it's abuse, and it can lead to physical abuse. And then now the sexting, where especially girls are sending, softcore porn type pictures, like this young lady just showing her bra. Okay, but it's great for the moment. What happens down the line? And if you're doing that on the screen, then why won't you do that in person? So this is a dangerous trend. It's very disturbing.
So these statistics are geared on teens, but they actually pan out in later life or early 20s into the 30s. 1 in 4 women report experiencing stalking, rape, or physical violence. 1 in 7 men do. Okay, the reasons are listed below, and there's that recurring theme that it's acceptable to hit somebody. Okay, and recognize always that emotional abuse is still abuse.
So, which side of this describes your relationship? Now, this is geared toward teen dating, but believe me, you older ladies, if you happen to be out there, this could happen to you too. Especially if you're desperate for a relationship. Is it the eye that the boyfriend looks into, or is it the one he punched you? Is it the hand that he holds, or the one he grabbed and twisted when you tried to walk away from him because you didn't agree with him? The cell phone. Is that the cell phone he uses to tell her he loves her, or the cell phone so he could constantly check up and know where she is? So all of these things add up, and you have to look at what's there. Are you minimizing the right side? The left side can happen, can become the right side before you even know it. The one thing you have to keep in mind is that extreme jealousy and possessiveness is not love. Okay, love does not hurt. Get that through your heads. If it doesn't feel right, it's probably not. Okay, here's a violence, power, and control wheel for teens. Most of it's pretty similar to the adult one. Peer pressure is in there. That's not so much going on with the adults. But when you get down around the intimidation and the threats, gossip is huge intimidation tactic. It's threatening to tell people that he's slept with you when he hasn't, or that you're a slut, or that you do something else. And so if these type of threats are being made to keep you, then what does he think of you? And again, those sexting emails you send, could show up online at any time. All he has to do is get upset with you. So if you don't want your mama to see it, don't send it. My mother used to always tell me, don't write anything in a letter you don't want your mother to see. So I'll update that to say, don't send any pictures over the email or in texting that you don't want your mom to see. So here's a list of 10 dating rights, and if you're dating, you need to go through these and make sure you have the right to say no, and no means no. You have the right to disagree. You should be treated as an equal. You should be able to live without fear and confusion. You can change your mind. It's not against the rules. Okay? You've got to be able to take care of yourself before you can take care of other people. you need to be treated with respect, and you need to treat him or her with respect. So here's the nonviolence wheel. Equality is in the center. Respect, trust and support, honesty, accountability. If you're wrong, you have to admit it, and not just admit it. And by the way, these apologies where somebody says, "I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings," that's not an apology. They need to apologize for what they did or what they said, not for hurting your feelings. Because what they're really saying, if that's one of those faux or fake apologies. That's like politicians make. Well, if I've upset you, I'm sorry. If what I said upset you, they're not apologizing for saying it. So keep that in mind. You got to share responsibility, be responsible parents. Remember that your money is a partnership, and believe me, if you get into a divorce, you're going to find that out very quickly. Be fair, and don't be threatening people. So this is also included in the printout. So finally, just know that every generation has a choice. That you can stop the behavior, you can stop the abuse. If you were abused, please don't take it on, or don't continue to go that way. You have the ability to break the cycle.